Gardeners of the Galaxy?
What? No. Rocket.
So I let Groot fill out the paperwork. I fixed it with an addendum.
Not the most well-known heroes you could hire, but definitely in the top 5 of most awesome names. Rocket, bona fide super genius and a wizard with explosives. Definitely not a raccoon. Mora, adopted daughter of Thanos, deadliest woman in the galaxy. Need we say more? Drax the Destroyer, convicted serial murderer and galactic war hero, often grumpy. Last and definitely least, Peter Jason Quill.
That's it? That's all you wrote?
It was a character limitation.
Let me start this review by briefly bringing up an unrelated game. Guardians of the Galaxy is not the Avengers. I bring that up because they're both Square Enix published Marvel games, and Avengers was, in my opinion, an extremely disappointing game that I was very excited about originally. It ended up feeling very unpolished, very repetitive, and overall felt unfinished, as most live service games end up feeling. Guardians of the Galaxy is not that. It's a complete experience, and more importantly, it's genuinely great. I bought the regular edition. Had I known it was going to be as good as it is, I would have spent the extra money on the digital deluxe edition, just to support it as much as I could and send the message that this is how you do it. They were handed the Guardians of the Galaxy license and made the best Guardians of the Galaxy game they could have possibly made with it. Having said that, I'm going to go into why I feel that way in a mostly spoiler-free review. There might be naturally some slight story spoilers here and there, but I'll keep all the big major stuff quiet. Let's start with the most important thing in any game, the gameplay. Guardians of the Galaxy at its core doesn't really do anything new that you haven't experienced anywhere else if you've played video games regularly. It borrows gameplay elements from several other sources, but what it borrows works incredibly well. It can mainly be defined as a third-person action shooter with some light RPG mechanics. This game puts you in the jet boots of Star-Lord, and you blast enemies away with his element guns, which have infinite ammo, but they do overheat. And they have a reload function similar to Gears of War, where once they overheat, if you press the trigger at the right time, they'll be instantly usable again and have brief power boost. Star-Lord can also avoid attacks by using his jet boots to dodge in different directions, and he's got melee attacks for close encounters. Eventually, as you progress through the game, his guns get additional elements, and certain enemies are weaker against certain type of attacks. Some might be weaker against cold, some might be weaker against electricity, and as far as the RPG elements, as you battle your way through enemies, you gain experience points that you can use to add different abilities to Star-Lord's arsenal, as well as the rest of the Guardians. And there's salvage laying around the environment that you collect that Rocket can later use at workbenches called perks that permanently improve Star-Lord's stats. For example, having your shield last longer, guns shoot faster when your health is low, there's a bunch of upgrades. Now you might hear all this and think, well, what about the other Guardians? Why all the Star-Lord talk? When the game was first revealed, I was a bit concerned, like many were, that it could get boring just playing as Star-Lord, and yes, he is the only playable character, but it never feels that way. One aspect Guardians of the Galaxy does incredibly well is making you feel like you're managing a team and fighting together as a unit. While you're blasting away as Star-Lord, you're also responsible for issuing commands to the rest of the Guardians in an almost Marvel Ultimate Alliance style. While the AI is fighting with you, you pick the other teammate, tell them what ability to use, and as you all get stronger, more abilities unlock. The combat is at its best when you're surrounded by a ton of enemies. It's very fast, it's very hectic, it's very fun. And using the right moves at the right time is crucial. Star-Lord could run around changing his elements to match different enemy types, while commanding Groot to rip the arm off a robot. Gamora finishes it off with a powerful sword attack, while Drax is charging at surrounding enemies, while Rocket is at a distance spreading firepower across the battlefield, and you, the player, are issuing all those commands at once. If you play through this game just blasting lasers as Star-Lord and nothing else, you're gonna have a really hard time. It's built around the concept of teamwork. It's crucial to success. Sometimes you'll also be able to do a huddle, which brings all the Guardians together, and you get a chance to motivate your team. Successfully motivating them gives everyone an attack boost temporarily.
Clark Dart's on the field, danger on all sides. It's time we stand and face it, and make sure they're nullified. Are we heroes to be laughed at? No! I'll laugh at them instead. Who's with me? Victory is ours!
We are!
The combat's surprisingly deep from a game that I thought was going to be a basic third-person shooter. Guardians of the Galaxy feels like a mix of Uncharted and Mass Effect. Like Uncharted, it's fairly linear, constantly pushing from point A to point B between battles against a horde of enemies and intense action sequences that nobody should be able to survive while you hop through different environments in the galaxy.
Son of a! I told you I saw that. Great timing! How did you guys...
Good to see you two. You're gonna walk across the ship as fast as you can.
And much like Uncharted, the constant banter between the characters really helps flesh out everyone's personality, and it keeps the game from ever being boring, even when explosions aren't filling the screen. Aside from all the galactic travel, it definitely has some Mass Effect feels with the branching conversations. And some choices do affect how some of the story details progress. For example, in one area, you have to decide if you want to attempt to sell Rocket or Groot for a scheme that the Guardians are cooking up. And although it doesn't permanently affect the game's story, everything does still end up panning out the same way in the end. It's interesting seeing how the story details and interactions change on a second playthrough based on your responses. The story is another aspect where Guardians of the Galaxy excels. In fact, if you're into comics, I would recommend some reading in the form of Marvel's Infinity War storyline. No, it's not the same Infinity War from the MCU movies at all, they really only shared the same name, but Guardians does pull some story elements specifically from this. The great thing is that you don't have to read the comics if you don't want to. The game's story explains enough to where you can go in blind. In fact, the story's so well told and epic that it could easily be Guardians of the Galaxy 3, the movie. To generalize the plot in a very basic spoiler-free way, the Guardians of the Galaxy go somewhere they're not supposed to be, they get in trouble with the Nova Corps and have to pay a fine, or they end up in prison. So their goal becomes getting enough money to pay the fine, and they develop plans to scam somebody in order to get that money. And in the process, of course, they encounter a force powerful enough to threaten the safety of the entire galaxy. That's the story in a nutshell. It nails the feel of the MCU Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's clearly heavily inspired by it, but it's not based on the MCU incarnation of the Guardians. The game has its own original take on the Guardians universe, using the movies as inspiration, while at the same time using story aspects from the comics as the background. For example, in the movie Guardians of the Galaxy 2, it's revealed that Star-Lord's father is Ego the Living Planet, whereas the game uses the more comic book origin of his father being the king of the Spartax Empire. And I don't remember the last time a game made me burst out loud laughing due to the game itself being funny, but there's so many moments in Guardians of the Galaxy that are comedy gold. The Guardians truly feel like this dysfunctional family that loves each other, but is constantly on the verge of breaking apart.
And you are not a monster. Oh yeah? You want monster? I'll show you monster!
Whoa, guys!
Cause that's our biggest problem, Quill. Come on, Groot, we got scut to do.
Rocket! What's with him? The Abomination is never happy.
Having said that, constant comedy can get exhausting, and Guardians of the Galaxy avoids that mistake by telling a story with genuine heart and emotion behind it. These are characters that have been through difficult times in their lives, and even though many of those moments happen prior to the events of the actual game, you can still feel how these characters are feeling, backed up by outstanding voice acting and motion capture all around. The acting is great. Every Guardian goes through moments in the game where they have to face events from their past. Star-Lord struggling with the memories of losing his mother and leaving Earth, Drax losing his wife and child, Gamora dealing with her childhood as a daughter of Thanos, and the horrible things that she was forced to do, Rocket dealing with the aftermath of the terrible experiments that created him, and Groot being the emotional support that kind of binds them all together. The game's filled with genuine tearjerker moments.
I know Raker brings back bad memories.
This isn't about Thanos! It's about Nikki, and what men like Raker and Thanos do to girls like her. Like me. My sister. The Nebula I knew had been twisted into a hateful, vengeful monster thing. One who would never stop unless I stopped her. So I did.
Excellent gameplay, excellent story, and all of this is backed up by an amazing soundtrack. Star-Lord's a child of the 80s, complete with a full 1980s mullet and the love of a fictional hair metal band called Star-Lord. It even goes as far as making an original album made by this fictional band that you can listen to on your ship at will. And the music happens to play during the motivational Groot moments mid-battle. It absolutely rocks, but the music isn't all original. It also has many other real-life hits straight from the world of GTA Vice City. Flock of Seagulls, even the Rick Roll song is here. The musical choices are perfect when the game isn't using, of course, its own original score. And I mentioned earlier that you don't have to read the comics to enjoy the game, but you'll definitely enjoy more all the small details if you do. It's filled to the brim with Easter eggs and comic references. Surprisingly, a good amount of X-Men references, with quick mentions of the Shi'ar Empire, and Star-Lord even has a Dazzler poster in his room. I thought this was a nice treat since the X-Men are allowed to play with the cool kids again now. Avengers and Spider-Man Easter eggs. Cosmo the Space Dog is in here. Dweller in Darkness is a boss battle. If you saw Shang-Chi, that was the evil force wanting to destroy everything in that movie. And that's just the surface. There's so much more in this game waiting to be discovered. And a Metroid Prime-like scanning mechanic with Star-Lord's helmet fills in a lot of the extra lore with different objects and characters. And I spent about an hour in the Collector's Museum reading every little thing I could and looking at every artifact, items from all over the Marvel Universe. Guardians of the Galaxy was an outstanding experience from start to finish, although at the same time, at the time of this review, I do think there needs to be a patch to address some issues. To be specific, I played the game on the Series X in performance mode, which gives you that silky smooth frame rate while still looking great graphically. For the most part, the frame rate stayed stable until near the end, where out of nowhere, the frame rate took a nosedive and was borderline unplayable at moments. Especially when there were a lot of enemies on screen. I pushed through it just to see how long it would last, and it just kept coming back. Reloading checkpoints didn't help, but closing and restarting the game completely seemed to take care of the issue. In another part, you had to press the Y button to do something, but afterwards, the Y button just stayed on the screen, it wouldn't go away. This is also something that never went away even after reloading checkpoints, had to close out and restart the whole game. And there were 2 or 3 moments where Star-Lord got stuck in the graphics, and I had to restart the checkpoint because I was literally stuck and I couldn't get out, I couldn't do anything. And another weird issue where in several scenes Groot was very clearly speaking, but he was missing voice lines. Characters would talk to him, there would be silence for a moment, and then the characters would respond, but you never heard Groot say anything.
How about you, bud? You doing okay? Are you sure? We saw some pretty messed up stuff in there. Yeah, maybe I'm not the best person to discuss it with you.
I can't say these issues were enough to ruin the game for me though. They were incredibly rare, but it was worth mentioning in case Square is looking to patch some of the rough edges. As far as replayability, the game does have a New Game Plus mode where you can run through it again with your upgrades. If you're a completionist like me, it has a nice set of achievements that don't require you to spend a million hours playing the game. Mostly comprised of beating the game, using all the different attack combinations, getting collectibles, including a ton of unlockable costumes for your characters. By the end of the game, I had spent about 17 hours on the campaign from beginning to end on the first playthrough, taking some time to explore and enjoy the Easter eggs. I also beat it on the hardest difficulty, which wasn't all that difficult if you manage your team properly during combat, but the game does have the option of managing individual components of the difficulty, and there are no difficulty achievements, so play as you wish. And that is my Guardians of the Galaxy review. Honestly, it's in the running for my game of the year. A huge surprise to me. It's the biggest surprise of the year. I mean, I thought it would be fun, but about the same quality level as the Avengers. I was wrong. Guardians of the Galaxy is the superior Marvel experience and worth every moment I put into it. I officially recommend it.
Just so...
metal?
Yeah.
If you'd like to support my work, I invite you to become a patron so you can gain access to my Patreon feed, exclusive updates, and progress reports on videos. There's multiple levels of support available, and every dollar helps keep the channel grinding away. I'd like to thank my current patrons and channel members for their continued support. If you enjoyed this video, hit like, subscribe, and click on the bell for all notifications, and make sure you follow me on social media so you never miss a thing. I'll catch you guys later.